Welcome to Marple Whispers. I'm Sean, your companion in secrets and suspicion. Here, the softest whisper can unravel the darkest crime. Are you listening closely? Good, then let the mystery begin. In a sleepy English village hiding a deadly secret, an elderly lacemaker found dead in her cozy cottage, a mysterious lace pattern pinned to her dress like a final clue. Was it her heart or murder? Enter the sharp-eyed Miss Marple, unravelling threads of betrayal, theft, and poison. Her lodger, desperate with debts, steals from her savings, but is he the killer? A jealous shopkeeper slips deadly foxglove into her tea, driven by envy of her exquisite patterns. But wait, there's a twist. Accomplices lurk in the shadows, a greedy nephew and a sneaky boy, all entangled in a web of greed. As Miss Marple decodes the lace's hidden message, lodger thief but not killer, Fletcher poison, justice strikes, exposing the conspiracy. In this whodunit, every knot hides a lie, and the truth will leave you breathless. Stay tuned for the full tale of deception and deduction. Chapter 1. The quiet cottage. The mist clung to the hedgerows of St. Mary Mead, like a reluctant lover, softening the outlines of the thatched roofs and the crooked chimneys that dotted the village skyline. It was one of those autumn mornings when the air carried a crisp bite, promising rain before noon, and the leaves whispered secrets as they fell from the ancient oaks lining the lane to Willowbrook Cottage. This unassuming dwelling, with its whitewashed walls and overgrown rose bushes, had stood sentinel at the edge of the village for generations, a place where time seemed to slow to the pace of a ticking grandfather clock. Inside, Miss Eliza Hawthorne moved with the deliberate grace of one who had long ago made peace with solitude. At 72, her fingers, gnarled yet nimble, danced over the pillow of her lace-making cushion, threading bobbins in a hypnotic rhythm that echoed the quiet pulse of her life. The room was a sanctuary of order. Shelves lined with spools of fine cotton, a polished oak table bearing her tools, and a single window framing the garden where herbs nodded in the breeze. Eliza seldom spoke to anyone beyond the necessities of trade, her world woven into the intricate patterns she created. Delicate veils for brides, collars for the gentry, each one a masterpiece born of patience and precision. But on this particular morning, the routine was shattered. Mr. Harold Jenkins, the village postman, pedalled up the gravel path with his usual cheer, a small parcel tucked under his arm. It was a delivery from London, addressed in a neat hand that suggested some distant supplier of threads. He rapped smartly on the door, expecting the faint shuffle of Eliza's slippers and her voice, thin as lace itself, bidding him enter. Silence greeted him instead. Frowning, Jenkins pressed his face to the mullioned window, his breath fogging the glass. There she sat, in her high-backed armchair by the fire, her head lolled to one side as if in deep slumber. A half-finished piece of lace was pinned haphazardly to the bodice of her faded blue dress, its threads trailing like unfinished thoughts. Jenkins's heart skipped. He knocked again, louder, but the only response was the distant caw of a rook. Alarmed, he dashed to the constable's house, his bicycle wobbling on the uneven path. Constable Polk arrived swiftly, his burly frame filling the doorway as he forced the latch. The air inside was stale, laced with the faint scent of chamomile from a cooling teapot on the table. Eliza Hawthorne was indeed dead, her skin cool to the touch, her eyes staring blankly at the ceiling beams. "Poor old soul," Polk muttered, closing her eyelids with a gentle hand. He noted the lace again, an odd adornment for a woman who treated her work with reverence, never wearing it casually. It depicted a tangle of flowers and vines, seemingly ordinary, yet pinned with such care that it might have been a final act. Word of the discovery rippled through St. Mary Mead like a stone tossed into a still pond. By midday, the villagers gathered in knots outside the post office, murmuring speculations. "Heart gave out, mark my words," said old Mr. Bantry, puffing on his pipe. "Lived alone too long. It's the quiet that kills you." But others wondered about the lodger, Mr. Reginald Thorpe, who had taken up residence in the spare room 6 months prior. A man of middling height with a neatly trimmed moustache and eyes that darted like minnows, Thorpe presented himself as a salesman fallen on hard times. He performed small repairs around the cottage in lieu of full rent, his presence a rare intrusion into Eliza's hermitage. Thorpe was away that morning, ostensibly on business in the nearby town, but he returned by evening to a scene of official scrutiny. Inspector Derek Craddock, a sharp-featured man from the county force who happened to be passing through on another matter, had taken charge. With his sergeant's notebook at the ready, Craddock examined the body before the doctor arrived. No signs of struggle, he observed, his voice clipped. But this lace, why pin it there? It's as if she meant it to be seen. Dr. Hargrove, a portly gentleman with a penchant for dramatics, confirmed the initial assessment. Death likely from cardiac arrest, though he ordered a full post-mortem to rule out anomalies. She was frail, he said, adjusting his spectacles. But one never knows with these reclusives. Secrets fester in isolation. As twilight fell, the news reached Downmead Cottage, home to Miss Jane Marple. Seated in her drawing room, surrounded by the comforting clutter of knitting baskets and potted ferns, she listened intently as her young maid, Cherry Baker, relayed the tale with wide-eyed enthusiasm. "They found her just sitting there, miss, with that bit of lace stuck right on her dress like a badge. Mr. Jenkins says it gave him the creeps. Looked like she'd been trying to say something with it." Miss Marple's needles clicked steadily, crafting a woolen scarf for the church bazaar. Her face, lined with the wisdom of years, remained serene, but her blue eyes, keen as a hawk's, sparkled with unspoken curiosity. "How very peculiar," she murmured. Eliza Hawthorne was not one for theatrics. Her lace was her voice, you see, silent yet eloquent. I wonder what message she might have left behind. Cherry shivered, drawing the curtains against the gathering dark. "Do you think it was foul play, miss? The lodger's a queer one, always slipping off to London without a word." Miss Marple smiled faintly, her mind already threading connections like bobbins on a pillow. "People are seldom what they seem, Cherry. In a village like ours, the quietest corners hide the loudest echoes." Outside, the wind picked up, rustling the leaves as if urging the secrets of Willowbrook to unfold. Chapter 2. Whispers of Inheritance. The village hall of St. Mary Mead, a sturdy brick edifice that had weathered everything from harvest festivals to wartime rallies, wore an air of solemnity on the day of the inquest. Banners from the recent flower show still hung limply from the rafters, their faded colours a stark contrast to the gravity of the proceedings. A scattering of wooden chairs had been arranged in neat rows, occupied by the curious and the concerned, farmers in their Sunday best, housewives clutching handbags, and a few wide-eyed children who had sneaked in despite parental admonitions. The air was thick with the scent of polished oak and damp wool, mingled with the faint aroma of pipe tobacco from the back benches. At the front, behind a makeshift table draped in a green baize cloth, sat the coroner, Mr. Archibald Grimshaw, a bespectacled man of middle years whose round face and precise manner suggested a life spent in meticulous ledgers, rather than dramatic inquiries. Flanking him were Inspector Derek Craddock, his lean frame exuding quiet authority, and Sergeant Lake, notebook poised like a weapon. The room hushed as Grimshaw cleared his throat, his voice echoing slightly off the high ceiling. "We are here to inquire into the death of Miss Eliza Hawthorne, found deceased in her home at Willowbrook Cottage on the morning of October 15th, he intoned, adjusting his glasses. "Evidence will be heard, and a verdict reached based on facts presented." First to testify was Mr. Harold Jenkins, the postman, who recounted his discovery with a tremor in his voice that betrayed the shock still lingering. "I looked through the window, sir, and there she was, still as a statue. That lace pinned to her dress. It fair gave me a turn. Not like her at all." Grimshaw nodded gravely, jotting notes, while Craddock's eyes narrowed, as if committing every detail to memory. Dr. Hargrove followed, his portly figure squeezing into the witness chair with a wheeze. "Post-mortem examination suggests cardiac failure," he declared, his tone sure, authoritative. "No external injuries, no signs of violence. The heart was enlarged consistent with her age and sedentary life. Toxicology pending, but I see no reason to suspect foul play." Murmurs rippled through the audience. A few heads nodded in agreement, relieved at the prospect of a peaceful passing. Yet Inspector Craddock, when called upon, introduced a note of discord. "While the medical evidence points to natural causes," he said, his voice measured, "certain anomalies warrant further scrutiny. Miss Hawthorne's savings, reputed to be considerable from her lace trade, have not been located. A preliminary search of the cottage yielded only a tin box containing £3, 7 shillings. This discrepancy raises questions." The room stirred. Whispers erupted like sparks. "Savings? She must have had a fortune tucked away." "Who'd know about that but her lodger?" Craddock continued, undeterred. "Moreover, the lace fragment pinned to her attire appears deliberate. It may be nothing, or it may be a clue." Grimshaw leaned forward. "Speculation, Inspector. We deal in facts here." But the seed of doubt had been sown, and the villagers' eyes darted toward Reginald Thorpe, seated rigidly in the front row, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. Thorpe was next, rising with the stiffness of a man under siege. He was dressed in a worn but neat suit, his moustache trimmed to precision, yet his eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. "I was away on business that morning," he explained, his voice steady but low. "Returned to find the constable at the door. Miss Hawthorne was kind to me, took me in when I had nowhere else. We shared meals, conversations. She spoke of no ailments beyond the usual aches." "And her finances?" Craddock pressed gently. Thorpe hesitated, then produced a folded document from his pocket. "She made a will, sir. Dated 3 weeks ago. Names me as beneficiary. Said she had no kin, and I'd been like a son." Gasps echoed. A woman in the back row clucked disapprovingly. Grimshaw examined the paper, his brows knitting. "Witnessed by the vicar and Mrs. Price from the bakery. Seems in order. But this doesn't address the missing funds." "I know nothing of them," Thorpe insisted, a bead of sweat tracing his temple. "She handled her own affairs. Perhaps hidden somewhere. She was cautious that way. As Thorpe resumed his seat, the coroner's gaze swept the room. Any other witnesses? A hand rose tentatively. Mrs. Agnes Fletcher, the village shopkeeper, a stout woman in her 50s with sharp features and a no-nonsense air. She bustled forward, smoothing her apron as if ready to haggle over prices. "I sold her lace for years," she said briskly. "Fine work it was, brought in good custom, but we had words recently. She claimed I shortchanged her on commissions. Nonsense, of course. It was a mix-up with the accounts. Settled it amicably, or so I thought." Her eyes flicked toward Thorpe. "She mentioned worries about money, though," said someone, was dipping into her purse. Craddock's interest sharpened. Who? Didn't say, but with a lodger about. She trailed off meaningfully, eliciting more murmurs. Young Tom Wilkins, the gardener's boy, a lanky lad of 17 with freckles and a shock of red hair, was called next, shuffling to the stand with evident reluctance. "I was near the cottage sometimes," he admitted, twisting his cap. "Looking for work, like. Miss Hawthorne gave me odd jobs now and then. Saw nothing amiss." "But you were seen loitering," Craddock noted mildly. Tom flushed. "Just passing by, sir." Honest. The inquest wound down with a few more testimonies. Neighbours attesting to Eliza's reclusive nature, the vicar praising her quiet piety. Grimshaw deliberated briefly, then delivered his verdict. Death by natural causes, pending toxicology. No evidence of misadventure at this time. The gavel fell, and the room exhaled collectively. Yet the air hummed with unsatisfied curiosity as people filed out into the drizzling rain. Clusters formed under umbrellas. "That will smells fishy. Thorpe's got motive, mark my words. And where's the money? Buried in the garden, perhaps." Miss Jane Marple, unobtrusive in her black coat and sensible hat, had observed from a side bench, her knitting bag at her feet. She had noted the unfinished edges of the lace when it was exhibited. A photograph passed around for inspection. How untidy, she thought. Eliza would never leave threads dangling so. Her gaze had lingered on the Thorpes' clasped hands, the slight tremor, on Mrs. Fletcher's defiant chin, on Tom's evasive eyes. Patterns, she mused, human patterns as intricate as lace. As the crowd dispersed, Miss Marple made her way homeward, her step light despite the weather. Danemead Cottage welcomed her with the warmth of a glowing hearth, where Cherry had laid out tea. "Well, miss," Cherry asked eagerly, pouring steaming cups, "what do you make of it?" Miss Marple settled into her armchair, unwrapping a shawl. "A puzzle, Cherry. The money vanished like smoke. Yet money leaves traces, and that will so recent, one wonders." Cherry's eyes widened. "You think the lodger did her in?" "Not necessarily. People act from desperation, not always malice." Miss Marple sipped her tea, her mind drifting to a long-ago incident in the village, a disputed inheritance that unravelled into betrayal. "I shall invite Mrs. Harmon for tea tomorrow. The vicar's wife hears everything." The following afternoon, under a sky cleared to watery blue, Mrs. Bunch Harmon arrived at Danemead, her plump figure bustling with village news. She was a kind soul, prone to chatter, her hat adorned with artificial cherries that bobbed as she spoke. "Such a sad business," she began, accepting a slice of seed cake. "Poor Eliza, alone but for that Thorpe fellow. The vicar witnessed the will, you know." She seemed insistent, as if time were short. Miss Marple's needles clicked softly. "Did she mention her savings?" Mrs. Harmon leaned in confidentially, not directly, but she hinted at trouble, someone meddling. Thorpe helped with chores, but outsiders, well, one hears rumours. Gambling debts, they say. Trips to London, race courses, perhaps. And Mrs. Fletcher? Miss Marple inquired innocently. Oh, Agnes, sharp as a tack, that one. Argued with Eliza over money, but who hasn't quarrelled in trade? Still, Eliza's lace was her gold mine. Agnes might have envied that. As tea progressed, Mrs. Harmon regaled with anecdotes, Tom's family struggles, his father's illness leaving them pinched, Eliza's rare kindnesses, like gifting lace to the church altar. Miss Marple listened, piecing fragments like a mosaic. Human nature, she reflected later, alone in her garden where late roses bloomed defiantly. Greed whispers, and actions follow. Meanwhile, Inspector Craddock pursued his inquiries with methodical zeal. At Willowbrook, he and Sergeant Lake conducted a thorough search, upending drawers and tapping walls. The tin box yielded its paltry sum, but no more. She sold lace for decades, Craddock mused. Hundreds, perhaps thousands, tucked away. Where? Sergeant Lake, a sturdy young man with a keen nose for detail, examined the work table. This lace pillow, threads everywhere. Maybe she hid notes in the bobbins? Craddock shook his head. Too obvious, but that pinned piece. Symbolic? Their search extended to the garden shed, where tools hung neatly and herb pots lined the shelves. Nothing amiss, yet Craddock's instincts prickled. Returning to the station, he wired London for Thorpe's background. The reply came swiftly. Minor debts, a failed business, motive enough for theft, perhaps worse. That evening, Craddock called on Mrs. Fletcher at her shop, a cosy emporium crammed with notions and sundries. The bell tinkled as he entered, and Agnes emerged from the back, wiping hands on her apron. "Inspector? More questions?" "Just clarifying," he said smoothly. "Your argument with Miss Hawthorne. Details?" Agnes huffed. She thought I owed her £5 on sales. I showed her the ledger, mistake on her part. We parted friends, but her eyes shifted, and Craddock noted a lace sample on the counter, identical to Eliza's style. "You admired her work." "Who wouldn't? Tried to learn, but she guarded her patterns like state secrets." As Craddock left, rain pattered anew, mirroring his growing suspicions. Tom Wilkins, intercepted at the pub, proved evasive. Loitering? Nah, just shortcuts. But his pockets jingled with coins unusual for a lad on meagre wages. Back at Danemead, Miss Marple pondered over her evening sherry. She had visited the vicar earlier, under pretence of church matters, gleaning that Eliza had seemed anxious during the will signing. Spoke of betrayal, the vicar recalled, but vaguely. Patterns emerged in Miss Marple's mind. Thorpe's access, Fletcher's envy, Tom's opportunism. Yet the lace nagged, a message perhaps woven in code. She recalled a distant cousin, a cryptographer in the war, who hid secrets in embroidery. Eliza was clever, she thought. If threatened, she'd leave a trail. The night deepened, stars pricking the velvet sky. In Willowbrook, Thorpe paced his room, shadows lengthening. Unbeknownst to him, a figure slipped through the garden gate. Tom, perhaps, or another? The village slept uneasily, whispers of inheritance fueling dreams of hidden wealth. Days blurred into investigation. Craddock interviewed more villagers. The baker's wife, who saw Thorpe arguing with Eliza weeks prior. The postman, recalling bulky letters from banks. Rumours swelled. Thorpe's London jaunts funded by pilfered coins. Fletcher plotting to claim the lace trade. Miss Marple, ever the observer, strolled the lanes chatting idly. At the grocer's, she learned of Fletcher's recent purchases. Strong tea, herbs, including foxglove for gardening. Odd, she murmured. Foxglove, digitalis, heart tonic, or poison? Inviting Cherry's husband for supper, she probed working-class gossip. Tom's been flush lately, he said. New boots, treats at the pub. Says he found work, but clues accumulated like dust motes in sunlight. Miss Marple sketched the lace pattern from memory, studying knots. Deviations, deliberate, dots, dashes, a code. Craddock, sensing an ally, visited Danemead. Your thoughts, Miss Marple? You've a knack for these things. She smiled demurely. Merely observation, Inspector. The will favours Thorpe, but money's gone, theft, or hidden, and the suspects. Fletcher resents, Tom covets, Thorpe needs. But Eliza pinned that lace. Why? Craddock nodded. Toxicology tomorrow. May change everything. As he departed, Miss Marple gazed at her garden, where shadows twisted like secrets. The whispers of inheritance grew louder, promising revelations in the threads of fate. The toxicology report arrived with the Dawn Post, sealed and ominous. Craddock tore it open at his desk, eyes widening. Traces of digitalis. Overdose, not natural. Murder. The village reeled as news spread. Arrest warrants loomed, suspicions crystallized. Thorpe, confronted, paled. Poison! Impossible! I brewed her tea myself. But evidence mounted. Digitalis in the shed, his fingerprints absent, but gloves? Fletcher's herb purchases. Tom's sightings near the hedgerows where foxglove bloomed wild. Miss Marple, informed by Cherry's grapevine, nodded sagely. The whispers become shouts. But the lace holds the key. She delved deeper, consulting old books on codes. The pattern yielded, faint letters in the weave, LOD, incomplete, yet tantalizing. Village life pulsed with tension, furtive glances, locked doors. Thorpe isolated, Fletcher defensive. Tom vanished briefly, then returned sheepish. Craddock's net tightened. Interrogations intensified. Thorpe admitted debts but swore innocence. She forgave my borrowings, small sums. Borrowings? Theft confirmed, yet murder. Miss Marple pieced it. Eliza knew of thefts, changed will in pity. But another hand poisoned. The chapter closed on a precipice. Craddock at Danemead again. Help me unravel this, Miss Marple. Her eyes twinkled. Threads pull tight, Inspector. Soon the pattern reveals all. Chapter 3. Threads of Suspicion. The revelation of poison sent shockwaves through St. Mary Mead, transforming the quiet village into a cauldron of whispered accusations and sidelong glances. What had seemed a gentle fading away now loomed as deliberate malice, the kind that lurked behind lace curtains and polite nods at the greengrocer's. Inspector Derek Craddock, his face etched with the grim determination of a man who had seen too many such twists, wasted no time. By midday, following the toxicology report's arrival, he had assembled his small team at the police station, a converted cottage with creaking floors and a perpetual draft, and mapped out the next steps. Digitalis, he said to Sergeant Lake, tapping the report with a finger. Extracted from foxglove. Common enough in gardens, deadly in excess. It mimics heart failure perfectly. Clever choice for a murderer who wanted it to pass unnoticed. Lake, ever the diligent note-taker, scribbled furiously. Suspects with access. Thorpe, obviously. Fletcher visited recently. Wilkins prowls about, but motive ties back to the money. Craddock nodded, his mind racing. The missing savings, estimated at over £500 from lace sales over the years, hung like a spectre over the case. Eliza Hawthorne had been frugal, Her only extravagance the fine threads imported from Belgium. We'll re-interview them all, and that lace, I want an expert's eye on it. Word of the poisoning spread faster than wildfire in dry grass. By afternoon, the villagers clustered in the tea shop, voices low but urgent. "Foxglove! Grows wild everywhere! Who hasn't got it in their patch?" muttered old Mrs. Price, the baker's widow, stirring her cup with vigour. "But to dose her tea, that's cold-blooded." Beside her, the postman's wife leaned in. "Thorpe brewed her pots, they say. And with that will in his favour, mark my words, he's for the noose." Unseen in a corner booth, Miss Jane Marple absorbed the chatter, her knitting a camouflage for keen ears. She had ventured out for what she called a breath of air, but really to gauge the pulse of the community. Villages, she knew, were like living organisms. Rumours were their bloodstream, carrying truths half-veiled. "People talk freely when they think no one's listening," she often said. Today the talk swirled around betrayal, greed and the fragility of trust in close quarters. Returning home, she found Cherry polishing the silver with unusual energy. "It's murder, miss, proper murder." Dr. Hargrove confirmed it, poison in her system. Cherry's eyes sparkled with a mix of horror and excitement. "They say it's that lodger. Arrested him this morning." Miss Marple set down her bag, her expression mild. "Arrested? On what grounds? Access to the poison, motive with the money, and he admitted to borrowing from her tin. Small amounts, he claims, but theft's theft." Cherry paused, buffing a spoon. "But you don't think it's him, do you?" Miss Marple smiled enigmatically. "Appearances deceive, Cherry. Thorpe has motive, yes, but poison requires patience and knowledge." Eliza was sharp. She'd have noticed outright theft. "No, there's subtlety here, like a misplaced stitch in lace." That subtlety drew Miss Marple to her writing desk, where she had sketched the lace pattern from the inquest photograph. Under a magnifying glass borrowed from the vicar, she examined the knots anew. Standard torchon lace at first glance, picots and grounds forming roses and ivy. But anomalies persisted, extra twists, uneven spacings. "A code," she murmured. "Eliza loved puzzles. She once told me of smugglers' signals in coastal lace from her youth." Decoding began in earnest. Assigning values, short threads for dots, long for dashes, she transcribed LODGER, then a gap, as if interrupted. "Lodger," she whispered, "accusation or misdirection." Meanwhile, at the station, Craddock interrogated Thorpe in a bare room lit by a single bulb. The lodger sat hunched, his neat moustache wilting under strain. "I swear, Inspector, I never harmed her. Yes, I took a few shillings, debts pressing, you see, but she knew, forgave me even, said I reminded her of a lost nephew." Craddock leaned forward, his voice like velvet over steel. "And the poison? Foxglove leaves in the shed. Your domain as handyman." Thorpe's eyes widened. "I tend the garden, but herbs were her province." She dried foxglove for tinctures, small doses for her heart, prescribed by the doctor years ago. A check with Hargrove confirmed it. Eliza had self-medicated sparingly. "But overdose is easy," the doctor admitted over the phone. "A few extra leaves in tea." Thorpe's alibi for the evening before death? A solitary walk, unverified. "I needed air," he said weakly. Craddock pressed. "London trips? Gambling?" A flush crept up Thorpe's neck. "Cards, yes. Lost more than one. But Eliza helped. Loaned me bits." Released on bail pending charges, Thorpe slunk back to Willowbrook, villagers averting eyes as he passed. Suspicion clung to him like fog. Craddock turned next to Mrs. Agnes Fletcher, summoning her to the station under grey skies threatening storm. She arrived defiant, her stout frame planted firmly in the chair. "Poison! Outrageous! I brought her jam, not death. But you argued over money," Craddock noted, "and witnesses place you there that evening. Tom Wilkins saw you." Agnes snorted. "Settling accounts, as I said." "She invited me for tea. We chatted about patterns. I left her well. Patterns?" Craddock's interest piqued. "She shared them." A hesitation. "Tried to teach me once. Jealous of her skill, perhaps. But murder? Absurd." Yet her fingers twisted a handkerchief, betraying nerves. Sergeant Lake, searching her shop, later found foxglove in her herb drawer. For teas, she claimed. Motive? Envy of Eliza's trade. Perhaps a plan to appropriate designs post-mortem. Tom Wilkins proved harder to pin down. Found in the pub, nursing a pint, he fidgeted under Craddock's gaze. "I nicked apples, but nothing more. Saw Mrs. Fletcher leave. Basket empty. Jam delivered, I suppose. But you've money lately," Craddock observed. "New boots, treats." Source? Tom mumbled about odd jobs. Pressed, he admitted peeking in windows. Curious-like. But no harm. Suspicion threaded through. Tom scavenging, perhaps stumbling on savings, or complicit. Miss Marple, sensing the web tightening, paid a call on the vicar's wife again, armed with scones. Mrs. Harmon welcomed her eagerly. "The poison dreadful! Thorpe's the talk, but I recall Eliza fretting about her herbs. Said someone tampered with them." "Tampered?" Miss Marple's eyes sharpened. "Yes, leaves missing. Blamed the wind, but—" A clue. Premeditation. Miss Marple probed further. Eliza's routines, visitors. Thorpe was devoted, in his way. But Fletcher pushed for secrets, lace recipes. Leaving the vicarage, Miss Marple detoured to Willowbrook, where Constable Polk guarded the scene. "Just a look, Constable." Old woman's fancy? Inside, the cottage felt chilled, echoes of life lingering. She examined the herb shelf, foxglove jars labelled neatly. One lid askew, recent use. The teapot, washed but stained inside. Multiple doses, perhaps, she thought, building toxicity slowly. Back home, she consulted an old herbal from her shelf. Digitalis, cumulative poison. Symptoms mimic age, fatigue, dizziness. Eliza had complained of such to the doctor. Evening brought Craddock to Danemid, hat in hand. "Your insights, Miss Marple." "The lace baffles me," she spread her sketch. "See these knots? Not errors, signals, most like lodger thief so far." Craddock whistled, accusing Thorpe, or warning. Eliza pinned it, dying, knew her end. They pored over it, decoding more, BUTNOT. "But not," Craddock said. "Not what?" "Killer?" Excitement built. "She exonerates him partially. Theft, yes. Murder, no." Craddock paced. "Then who? Fletcher? Possibly. Or alliance? Tom fetching herbs for her." The inspector departed energized, ordering surveillance. Night fell. Village hushed but alert. Thorpe, alone, heard creaks, imagination, or intruder seeking savings. Next day, breakthroughs. Lake found Thorpe's London receipts. Debts settled recently. From Eliza's tin, but amounts mismatched. Fletcher's ledger showed discrepancies. Overcharged Eliza subtly. Tom cornered, confessed minor thefts, coins from the shed. But no poison! Threads tangled, multiple culprits. Miss Marple walked the lanes, observing. At the hedgerow, foxglove wilted, plucked recently. Inviting Dr. Hargrove for tea, she queried symptoms. Gradual build-up, weeks perhaps. Timeline shifted. Poisoning predated Fletcher's visit. Craddock re-examined. Thorpe's daily teas, vehicle. but Miss Marple recalled Eliza's independence. She brewed her own mostly. Clue, shared pot that fatal night. Village buzz peaked at church Sunday. Sermons on covetousness. Eyes on suspects. Post-service, Miss Marple chatted with Mrs. Price. Eliza mentioned a hidden cache to the vicar. Rumours flew. Attic, garden, Craddock searched anew. Nothing. Miss Marple decoded further. FLETCHERPOIS. Fletcher poison, she exclaimed alone. Puzzle forming. Eliza knew thief and killer separate. Confrontation loomed. Tension mounted. Anonymous note to Craddock. Check Fletcher's herbs. Analysis matched Eliza's dose. Fletcher denied, planted. Tom spotted fleeing Cottage night before death. Web spun. Jealousy, theft, murder. Miss Marple, piecing final threads, awaited denouement. Chapter 4. Hidden Knots. The days following the confirmation of poison dragged on in St. Mary Mead like a slow, unravelling skein, each hour revealing new tangles in the web of deceit that had ensnared poor Eliza Hawthorne. The village, once a haven of predictable routines, morning milk deliveries, afternoon bridge games, evening strolls along the common, now pulsed with an undercurrent of dread. Doors that had stood ajar for neighbours now clicked shut with finality. Conversations at the well or the butcher's shop veered into hushed tones, eyes flicking suspiciously toward familiar faces. Who among us? The unspoken question hung in the air, as potent as the foxglove blooming unchecked in the hedgerows. Inspector Derek Craddock, his lean features sharpened by sleepless nights, moved through this atmosphere like a blade through silk. The arrest of Reginald Thorpe had been swift, based on the damning trifecta of opportunity, motive, and proximity. "You had the run of the place," Craddock had said in the stark interrogation room, his voice echoing off the whitewashed walls. "The will in your favour, debts mounting like storm clouds, and poison in the very shed you tended. Deny it if you must, but the noose tightens." Thorpe, shackled and pale, had shaken his head vehemently, his moustache quivering. "Arrest me for theft if you will. I admit to dipping into her tin, a pound here, 2 there, to stave off the bailiffs. But murder? Never. She was my benefactor, Inspector. Her teas were her own brew. I only fetched water from the pump." His protestations rang with a desperation that Craddock noted but did not yet credit. Fingerprints on the digitalis jar? Absent, wiped clean, perhaps. Alibis? Vaporous as mist. The lodger languished in the county jail, his cell a cold reminder of how quickly fortune could fray. Yet not all were convinced of Thorpe's guilt. In Danemead Cottage, Miss Jane Marple sat by her window. The lace pattern, or rather a meticulous copy she had sketched during the inquest, spread across her lap like a map to buried treasure. The rain had ceased, leaving the garden glistening under a hesitant sun, but her focus was inward, on the hidden knots that Eliza had woven with her dying hands. Not convinced at all, she murmured to herself, adjusting her spectacles. Eliza had been a woman of precision. Her lace never bore flaws without purpose. Those deviant twists, those irregular spacings, they whispered of intent. Cherry, bustling in with a tray of biscuits and cocoa, caught the murmur. "Talking to yourself again, miss?" "About the lace, I suppose. Folks say it's just decoration, but you see more, don't you?" Miss Marple smiled faintly, her blue eyes twinkling. "Decoration seldom pins itself to a bodice in one's final moments, Cherry. No, this is a cipher, a message from beyond." Eliza knew her craft. She drew from old traditions, smugglers' codes in the coastal villages, where lace patterns signalled safe harbours or warned of excised men. She traced a finger over the design. Roses entwined with ivy, seemingly innocent, but with knots that bulged unnaturally, forming patterns akin to Morse code or ancient runes. Recalling a faded memory from her girlhood, a visit to a Cornish aunt who spun tales of contraband hidden in threadwork, Miss Marple set to work. She assigned values, plump knots for dashes, slender for dots, crossings for spaces. Laboriously, letter by letter, the message emerged, LODGERTHIEF. "Lodger thief," she whispered, a chill tracing her spine. But the pattern continued, threads trailing into further anomalies, BUTNOTKILLER, but not killer. Miss Marple leaned back, the cocoa forgotten. Eliza had known of Thorpe's pilfering, perhaps even confronted him, yet she exonerated him of the greater sin. Why? Compassion for a wayward soul, or a calculated misdirection to protect the true culprit while exposing the lesser crime? The lace held more. Faint deviations hinted at additional words, but the light faded and her eyes wearied. Meanwhile, Craddock pursued physical trails. At Willowbrook Cottage, now sealed with police tape fluttering like morbid ribbons, he and Sergeant Lake scoured the garden shed anew. The air inside was musty, redolent of earth and dried herbs. Jars lined the shelves, chamomile, lavender, and yes, foxglove, leaves crisped and labelled in Eliza's neat hand. No prints, Lake reported, dusting the glass. Wiped, or gloves used. Craddock knelt, examining the floor. Scuffs in the dirt, perhaps from recent footsteps. Someone was here after her death. Or before, tampering. Outside the hedgerows beckoned, wild foxglove nodding purple bells. Accessible to all, but who had the knowledge to distill it into deadly potency? A villager's tip led them to the apothecary in the next town, where records showed Eliza purchasing digitalis tincture sporadically. For her heart, the chemist confirmed over wire-rimmed glasses, but she preferred her home remedies, said they were purer. No unusual sales to others, but Craddock noted the ease of procurement. Back in the village, suspicions swirled like eddies in the stream. Young Tom Wilkins, emboldened by his earlier brush with authority, loitered near the pub, regaling cronies with half-truths. Saw shadows at the cottage nights before, he boasted, pint in hand. Could have been anyone, Fletcher maybe with her basket. But when Craddock cornered him later, Tom's bravado crumbled. Just tales, sir. I nicked nothing big. Apples, a tool or two. But I heard her muttering once about hidden knots in her work. Thought she meant lace troubles. Hidden knots? Craddock echoed, jotting it down. A phrase that resonated, perhaps a clue to the cipher. Miss Marple, undaunted by the arrest, requested permission to view the original lace, now in evidence at the station. Craddock, respecting her acumen, obliged escorting her personally. The station was a bustle of typewriters and ringing phones, but in a quiet back room, the lace lay under glass, its delicacy belying the weight it carried. "May I?" Miss Marple asked, donning white gloves provided by Lake. She spread it flat, magnifying glass in hand. The design gleamed, petals and vines, but now, with her partial decoding, the anomalies leapt out. "See here, Inspector, these extra loops, not errors but deliberate. Continuing from but not killer, FLETCHERPOISON. Craddock's breath caught. "Fletcher poison! Direct accusation!" "Indeed," Miss Marple replied calmly. Eliza pinned it as her strength waned, knowing it would be seen. She trusted someone would unravel it, perhaps me, from our shared interest in crafts. But why not speak plainly? A note, a shout, fear perhaps, or the poison's grip, delirium setting in. Lace was her language, silent, enduring. Miss Marple paused, eyeing a final cluster of knots. And there's more. SAVINGSINATTICBEAM. Savings in attic beam, Craddock exclaimed. The money, hidden all along. They hastened to Willowbrook, the sergeant in tow. The attic was a dim realm of cobwebs and forgotten trunks, accessed by a creaky ladder. Beams arched overhead like ribs in a whale's belly. Craddock probed each, tapping for hollows. At the third, a dull thud rewarded him. With a chisel, he pried open a concealed panel, a hollowed space stuffed with banknotes, rolled tightly and tied with thread. Hundreds, Lake whistled, counting roughly. 550, give or take. Craddock's mind whirred. Eliza hid it well. Thorpe stole petty cash, but not this. She knew, left the message to expose him as thief, but point to Fletcher as murderer. But why exonerate Thorpe? Lake puzzled. Miss Marple, who had insisted on accompanying them despite the dust, dusted her hands. Humanity, Sergeant. She saw his desperation, perhaps pitied him as a surrogate kin, but Fletcher's act was betrayal of trust. Envy turned lethal. Emboldened, Miss Marple suggested a re-interview with Agnes Fletcher. They found her in her shop, the bell tinkling ominously as they entered. The air was thick with scents of lavender sachets and starched linens, but Agnes's face paled at their approach. She fingered a lace collar around her neck, one of Eliza's finer pieces, Miss Marple noted. Mrs. Fletcher, Craddock began formally, new evidence has surfaced. Care to revise your statement? Agnes's eyes darted. Evidence! I've told all. The visit was amicable. Miss Marple interjected gently, her voice like honey over steel. That collar, lovely work. Eliza's pattern, isn't it? Did she teach you much? The hidden knots, perhaps? Agnes flushed, her fingers tightening. A little. She showed me basics, but I lacked the knack. Why? Because, Miss Marple continued, Eliza wove secrets into her lace. Codes, you see, and this one accuses you of poison. Agnes laughed, a brittle sound. Absurd! Lace doesn't speak. But it does, Craddock countered, producing the pattern. Decoded by an expert, Miss Marple here. Fletcher, poison, direct. The shopkeeper's defiance cracked. Lies! She was jealous I sold her work, built her reputation. If anyone poisoned, it was accidental. Her own tincture overdosed. Or deliberate, Miss Marple said softly. You visited often enough to tamper. Ground leaves in your mortar, slipped into her jar. Envy of her skill, her savings. With her gone, patterns yours to claim. Agnes slumped but rallied. Prove it, Craddock smiled grimly. Residue matches, and Tom saw you harvesting foxglove, not roses. As Agnes was led away for questioning, protesting vehemently, the village exhaled. But Miss Marple lingered in the shop, examining shelves. A hidden drawer yielded notes, sketched lace patterns, Eliza's designs copied furtively. Evening fell softly, lamps glowing in cottages. At Danemead, Miss Marple shared findings with Craddock over tea. Fletcher plotted slowly, building doses. Thorpe's theft a distraction. Eliza forgave him, but condemned her. But the will, Craddock queried, changed in mercy. She knew death neared, left clues in lace. Thorpe, released pending review, visited gratefully. She saved me, in a way. Miss Marple nodded. Knots hide, but truth unties. Yet a niggle remained, full message decoded. Final threads, SAVEME, a plea unspoken, suspense lingered, knots not fully hidden, Chapter 5. Unravelling Clues. The veil of suspicion that had shrouded St. Mary Mead began to lift ever so slightly in the wake of Reginald Thorpe's arrest. But the air remained thick with unanswered questions, like the fog that rolled in from the meadows on chill evenings. Villagers went about their daily tasks with a heightened wariness, locking garden gates that had stood open for decades, peering from behind net curtains at passers-by, and exchanging cryptic nods over fences. The poison's revelation had transformed idle chatter into pointed inquiries. No longer was Eliza Hawthorne's death a sad but natural footnote in village annals, but a sinister plot that implicated neighbours, friends, perhaps even family. "It's like living in one of those detective novels," the postman confided to his wife, "where everyone's got a secret gnawing at them." Inspector Derek Craddock, ensconced in the makeshift command post at the police station, felt the weight of those secrets pressing down. Piles of reports cluttered his desk, toxicology details confirming the gradual build-up of digitalis, witness statements riddled with half-truths, and that enigmatic lace pattern, now photographed and annotated. "We're close," he told Sergeant Lake, rubbing his temples. "But close isn't caught. Thorpe's in the frame, but something nags, like a loose end in a seam." Lake, ever practical, suggested recanvassing the locals. Young Wilkins seemed twitchy last time. Might crack under pressure. Their opportunity came sooner than expected. That afternoon, as rain pattered intermittently against the station windows, Constable Polk ushered in a drenched Tom Wilkins, the boy's red hair plastered to his forehead, his eyes wide with the fear of a cornered fox. "He came voluntary, sir," Polk reported. "Says he's got something to add. Frightened by the arrest, I reckon." Tom stood shifting from foot to foot, his boots leaving muddy prints on the linoleum. Craddock gestured to a chair, his voice coaxing. "Sit, lad. No trouble if you're truthful. What brings you?" Tom swallowed hard, twisting his cap. "It's about that night before Miss Hawthorne died. I didn't tell all before. Was scared, see? But with Mr. Thorpe locked up, it don't sit right." He leaned forward, voice dropping. "I saw Mrs. Fletcher at the cottage." Evening it was, dusk falling. She carried a basket covered with a cloth. Looked like jams or preserves, but she glanced around sneaky-like before knocking. Craddock's pulse quickened. "And you were where?" "Behind the hedge, sir." Taking a shortcut home. Honest. Heard voices inside, then Mrs. Fletcher left, empty-handed. Basket stayed. Lake jotted notes furiously. "Time, around 7, moon rising early." Craddock nodded slowly. "Why hold back before?" Tom flushed. "Mrs. Fletcher's sharp. Gives me the eye in her shop. Thought she'd deny it, make me look the liar. But if it's poison, well, jams don't kill, but what if it weren't jam?" The inspector dismissed him with a warning to stay put, then turned to Lake. "Fetch Mrs. Fletcher. Time for truths." Agnes Fletcher arrived under escort, her stout figure bristling with indignation, umbrella wielded like a weapon. The station interview room felt smaller with her presence, the air charged. She sat heavily, folding her arms. "This better be quick, Inspector." Shops busy, autumn sales. Craddock wasted no preamble. "Your visit to Willowbrook the evening before Eliza's death. Denied it before. Now a witness places you there, with a basket." Agnes's eyes narrowed, but a flicker of unease crossed her face. "Witness? That Wilkins boy, I suppose. Flighty lad, always skulking. All right, I visited. To settle our spat over commissions. She invited me, said we'd talk over tea. And The basket? Gifts to smooth things. Jam, yes, and a herbal blend. Foxglove tea for her heart. She swore by it, asked me to prepare some fresh. My garden's got a fine patch. Her voice steadied, but her hands clenched. Craddock leaned in. Foxglove, digitalis, the very poison that killed her. Coincidence? Agnes recoiled. Poison! She used it medicinally. Small doses strengthen the heart. Doctor knew. If she overdid, that's her folly, not mine. But you ground it, delivered it. Motive? Her patterns, her trade eclipsing yours. Ridiculous, Agnes snapped, but sweat beaded her brow. We parted friends. Ask anyone. Craddock let silence stretch, then nodded to Lake. Detain her for now. Statements don't align. As Agnes was led away, protesting volubly, Craddock pondered. Accidental or calculated excess? The basket, a Trojan horse of death. Word of the confrontation spread like spilled ink, absorbing into every corner of the village. By evening, the tea shop buzzed anew. Fletcher arrested? Well, I never, clucked Mrs. Harmon, the vicar's wife, to her companions. Always had a mean streak, short-changed me on buttons once. Others defended, she's brusque, but murder? Overlace. Miss Jane Marple, ever the quiet observer, heard the echoes through Cherry's reports. Seated in her cosy drawing-room, fire crackling against the autumn chill, she revisited the lace pattern under brighter lamplight. Foxglove tea, she murmured. Clever disguise, familiar, trusted. Her needles lay idle. The cipher demanded focus. The message, partially decoded, stared up. Lodger thief, but not killer, Fletcher poison. But threads dangled, incomplete. Miss Marple adjusted her magnifying glass, tracing finer deviations, subtle pricks, minute loops. Ah, she breathed. Additional letters formed, savings in attic beam. Clever, clever Eliza, Miss Marple said aloud, a smile touching her lips. The full accusation, woven in desperation as poison coursed through her veins. She recalled a distant case from her youth in the neighbouring parish. A dying seamstress who embroidered her killer's name in a sampler, overlooked as mere decoration until a sharp-eyed niece unravelled it. Patterns repeat, Miss Marple thought. Human frailty, greed, eternal as the tides. She telephoned Craddock forthwith, her voice steady. Inspector! Progress on the lace. Come at once. Bring the original if you can. Craddock arrived promptly, hat damp from a fresh shower. Sergeant Lake trailing. Miss Marple, your timing's impeccable. Fletcher's clamming up, but Wilkins's tip shakes her. Indeed, she replied, ushering them in. Tea was served, strong, unadorned, as she spread the lace. See here, the code completes. Lodger thief but not killer. Fletcher poison. Savings in attic beam. Craddock's eyes widened. The money, hidden there all along? Precisely. Eliza safeguarded it, knowing thefts occurred. Pointed to Thorpe as pilferer, but absolved him of murder. Fletcher's the venom. Lake whistled. Why name Thorpe at all? Miss Marple sipped tea. To ensure scrutiny, she foresaw suspicion falling on him. Access will. By exposing his lesser crime, she directed us to the greater, and the savings, proof of her foresight. Craddock stood. To the cottage. If the money's there, it corroborates. They drove through twilight, the village lights twinkling like wary eyes. Willowbrook loomed shadowy, tape still barring the door. Inside, flashlight beams danced as they climbed to the attic. Dust motes swirled. Trunks of old garments and yellowed letters flanked the space. Beams, Craddock directed. They tapped systematically, solid thuds until the central one rang hollow. With tools from the shed they pried. A compartment revealed, lined with oilcloth. Inside, bundles of notes secured with lace scraps. £600, Lake tallied, awed. Craddock pocketed a sample. Thorpe stole pittance. This was untouched. He confessed small sums, matches. Back at the station, Thorpe was recalled from his cell. Haggard but hopeful, he eyed the notes. Her hoard, I never knew. Took from the tin only, swore I'd repay. Why point to you? Craddock asked. Miss Marple, present as consultant, interposed, because she trusted justice to discern. You were family to her in a way, flawed but redeemable. Thorpe nodded, tears glinting. She said as much, forgave me. Released with charges reduced to theft, Thorpe left humbled. I'll make amends, village charity perhaps. But Fletcher awaited. Confronted with the lace's message, she blanched. Fantasy. Codes in lace. Eliza was dotty. Decoded irrefutably, Craddock countered, and your tea, analysed residue, matches the overdose. Agnes deflated. It was meant to weaken, not kill. She hoarded patterns, money, shared nothing after years of my selling. I added extra foxglove, thinking she'd sicken, confide secrets, but she brewed stronger pots. Intent matters, Craddock said grimly. Manslaughter at least. Miss Marple watched silently, noting Agnes's regret, genuine or feigned. Village settled uneasily, clues unravelling toward closure. Yet Miss Marple pondered, full truth, a lingering knot. The next days brought corroborations. Dr. Hargrove reviewed notes. Eliza's complaints of fatigue predated Fletcher's visit, slow poisoning. Cumulative, he confirmed. Tom cleared, confessed peeking for opportunities, but seeing Fletcher's acts. She crushed leaves in the garden, he added. Craddock pieced timelines. Fletcher's envy festered. Subtle doses in shared teas during reconciliations. Thorpe's thefts coincidental distraction. Miss Marple, in her garden, drew parallels to a London scandal. A poisoned inheritance, clues in a quilt. Greed stitches its own shroud. As sun set, clues unravelled, truth emerging thread by thread. Chapter 6. The Final Twist. The sun dipped low over St. Mary Mead, casting long shadows across the thatched roofs and winding lanes, as if the village itself were holding its breath for the unravelling of secrets long entwined. Willowbrook Cottage, once a bastion of solitude, now stood as the stage for a gathering that hummed with anticipation and dread. Inspector Derek Craddock had orchestrated it meticulously, summoning the key players under the guise of clarifying loose ends. The air inside the modest parlour was thick with the scent of polished wood and fading lavender, remnants of Eliza Hawthorne's careful life. Chairs had been arranged in a semicircle facing the hearth, where a low fire crackled, its flames dancing like accusing fingers. Reginald Thorpe arrived first, released on bail and looking gaunt in his ill-fitting suit, his moustache drooping under the weight of recent ordeals. He nodded curtly to Craddock, avoiding the eyes of Sergeant Lake, who stood sentinel by the door. Next came young Tom Wilkins, scrubbed clean but fidgeting, his freckled face a map of youthful apprehension. He slouched into a seat, cap clutched in white-knuckled hands. Mrs. Agnes Fletcher swept in last, her stout frame rigid with defiance, escorted by Constable Polk. Her sharp eyes scanned the room, lips pursed as if tasting something bitter. A smattering of villagers, curious souls like Mrs. Harmon, Mr. Bantry, and the postman, filled the remaining chairs, drawn by whispers of revelation. Miss Jane Marple sat unobtrusively in a corner armchair, her knitting bag at her feet, needles idle for once. She observed the assembly with her characteristic mildness, blue eyes sharp as pins beneath her lace cap. The room fell silent as Craddock cleared his throat, standing before the group like a conductor poised for the crescendo. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice resonant in the hushed space, "we are here to lay bare the truth behind Eliza Hawthorne's death. What appeared a quiet passing was, as we now know, murder by poison, digitalis, administered cunningly over time. The clues, woven literally into her final act, point to motives of greed, envy, and betrayal. Miss Marple, whose insight has been invaluable, will elucidate." All eyes turned to the elderly spinster, who rose slowly, her demeanour calm amid the tension. She smoothed her skirt, then addressed them with the gentle authority of one who had unravelled many a human knot. "Thank you, Inspector. It is always sad when village peace is shattered by such deeds, but truth must out. Let us begin with Eliza herself, a woman of quiet strength, her life threaded through with lace, each pattern a testament to patience and skill. She lived alone, but not without connections. Mr. Thorpe, her lodger, became one such thread." Thorpe shifted uncomfortably, his gaze fixed on the floor. Miss Marple continued, her voice steady. "You came to Willowbrook down on your luck, Mr. Thorpe, a salesman with debts from ill-advised wages in London. Eliza took pity, offering board for chores. But desperation led you astray. You dipped into her tin box, small sums at first, then more. She discovered it, didn't she?" Thorpe's head jerked up, eyes wide. "How? Yes. She confronted me one evening over tea. I begged forgiveness, swore I'd repay. She was kind, said she'd known hardship in her youth, a lost love who gambled away their future. She forgave, even altered her will to include me, seeing a chance for redemption." Murmurs rippled through the room. Mrs. Harmon gasped softly. Miss Marple nodded. "Indeed." But forgiveness came with watchfulness. Eliza hid her true savings, accumulated from years of lace sales, in the attic beam, safe from prying hands. She left clues to your theft in her dying message, not from malice, but to ensure the full story emerged. Craddock interjected, holding up the lace pattern. This, pinned to her dress, a cipher in knots, decoded by Miss Marple. Lodger thief, but not killer. She absolved you of murder, Mr. Thorpe, while exposing the lesser crime. Thorpe's shoulders sagged in relief, but his voice trembled. "Then why arrest me?" "A necessary step," Craddock replied. "Circumstances pointed strongly. Your access, the will, the debts, but the lace tells otherwise." Miss Marple turned her gaze to Tom Wilkins, who shrank back. "And you, young Tom?" "Your role was smaller, but telling. Loitering near the cottage, seeking odd jobs or opportunities. You witnessed more than you admitted at first." Tom's face reddened. I did nick a few things, apples, a tool. But I saw her, Mrs. Fletcher, that night, basket in hand, lingering in the garden. Picking foxglove, I thought it roses at first." She glanced around, sneaky. Agnes Fletcher snorted derisively. "The boy's imagining, always skulking, that one. Unreliable as a weather vane." Miss Marple's eyes softened, but her tone firmed. "Not imagining, Mrs. Fletcher. Your visits to Eliza were more frequent than you let on, under pretense of business, settling accounts. But envy festered. For years, you sold her lace in your shop, profiting from her artistry. Yet she guarded her patterns jealously, her skill unmatched. You coveted them, and the savings they represented. Agnes's chin lifted defiantly. Coveted. Admired, perhaps. She taught me snippets, but hoarded the best. After all I did, promoting her work, building custom, a share was due. But murder? Absurd. The room tensed, flames flickering shadows across faces. Miss Marple paced slowly, her steps measured. Not absurd, sadly. The argument over commissions was a smokescreen. You plotted subtly, knowing her weak heart and her habit of self-medicating with foxglove tincture. Small doses strengthen, excess kills, mimicking natural failure. You ground extra leaves in your mortar. Residue found there matches the overdose in her system. Agnes paled, her hands twisting in her lap. Coincidence! I prepared teas for many, headaches, nerves. But for Eliza, it was deliberate, Miss Marple pressed. You slipped augmented blends during visits, building toxicity gradually. The final evening, the basket held gifts, jam laced with poison. Or perhaps the tea itself fortified. She brewed it trustingly, unaware. As symptoms mounted, dizziness, fatigue, she realized too late. In her waning strength, she wove her accusation into lace, pinning it where it would be seen. Craddock produced the decoded message, reading aloud, Lodger thief but not killer. Fletcher poison. Savings in attic beam. Gasps echoed. Mr. Bantry puffed his pipe furiously. Agnes rose halfway, voice shrill. Lies! That lace, ramblings of a failing mind, no proof. Proof abounds, Craddock countered. Your shop ledger shows discrepancies, skimming from her sales, patterns copied furtively, found hidden in your drawer. Tom saw you harvesting foxglove. The doctor notes her symptoms aligned with cumulative dosing. And the savings, recovered intact, disproving outright theft as motive for others. The villagers leaned forward, enthralled, the parlour alive with suspense. Miss Marple halted before Agnes, her expression compassionate yet unrelenting. Why, Mrs. Fletcher? Envy alone. Agnes's defiance crumbled, tears streaking her cheeks. She sank back, voice breaking. She hoarded it all. Talent, money, secrets. I slaved in that shop, hawking her wares while my own dreams withered. When she refused to share patterns, saying I lacked the touch, it stung. I thought a little sickness would loosen her tongue, make her confide. But she grew weaker faster than expected. That last visit, I added more panicked. She sipped the tea, chatted amiably. I left, but guilt gnawed. Next morning, gone. Confession hung heavy, the fire's crackle the only sound. Thorpe stared, horrified. Tom averted his eyes. Mrs. Harmon whispered a prayer. Craddock signalled pork. Agnes Fletcher, you're under arrest for the murder of Eliza Hawthorne. As she was led away, sobbing, I didn't mean to kill, only to share. The room exhaled collectively. Villagers murmured, piecing the horror. Miss Marple resumed her seat, addressing the group softly. Eliza's lace was her voice in death, deliberate, encoded. She knew I'd recognize the code from old tales we shared of smuggling signals in thread. Village ways are universal. Greed twists even the kindest hearts. Craddock shook her hand. You're doing, Miss Marple. Without you, the knots remain hidden. Thorpe approached humbly. I'll return what I took, donate to the church, in her memory, reform, as she hoped. Tom mumbled apologies, vowing honest work. As the gathering dispersed into the twilight, villagers chattering in awed clusters, St. Mary Mead stirred toward healing. Secrets aired, justice served. Miss Marple walked homeward, arm in cherries, the stars emerging like pricked holes in velvet. In Danamead by the fire, her needles clicked anew. A scarf, patterns simple yet profound. Human nature, she reflected, threads of light and dark woven eternally. But in the quiet, a final thought lingered. Eliza's plea in the lace's deepest knot, SAVEME, unheard in time, but heeded now. The village slept, mysteries resolved, yet ever watchful for the next twist in fate's design. Chapter 7. Lingering Shadows. The arrest of Agnes Fletcher sent ripples through St. Mary Mead that lingered long after the constable's car had vanished down the lane, its tires crunching gravel like bones underfoot. The village, accustomed to the gentle ebb and flow of everyday scandals, lost cats, disputed fence lines, overripe gossip at the WWA meetings, now grappled with the stark reality of murder in their midst. Doors that had begun to creak open in relief now bolted shut anew. Evening walks shortened as dusk fell, and the church bells tolled with a sombre note that seemed to echo Eliza Hawthorne's unspoken pleas. "It's over," the vicar intoned at the next Sunday service, his voice resonant in the stone nave, "but let us pray for healing." Yet not all wounds mend cleanly, and Miss Jane Marple, seated in her customary pew, felt the prick of an unresolved stitch in the fabric of the case. Back at Danemead Cottage, as autumn leaves swirled in eddies outside her window, Miss Marple settled into her armchair with a cup of oolong, her knitting resumed but her mind far from the woolen loops. Cherry hovered, eager for details of the gathering. "So Fletcher confessed, miss? Proper villainous, hoarding grudges like old jam jars." Miss Marple nodded absently, her blue eyes distant. "Confessed, yes, but confessions, Cherry, are like lace. Beautiful on the surface, but sometimes the pattern hides flaws. A dropped stitch here, a tangled thread there." Cherry paused in her dusting, brow furrowed. "You mean she lied?" But the inspector seemed satisfied. Money found, code decoded. "Satisfied for now," Miss Marple replied mildly. "Yet something nags." Eliza's message was precise. Fletcher poison. But why the gradual dosing if envy alone drove her? And Tom Wilkins's sightings, he mentioned shadows, plural. One wonders if Fletcher acted unaided. The thought germinated like a seed in fertile soil. That evening, Miss Marple penned a note to Inspector Craddock, requesting a quiet meeting. "Loose ends, Inspector," she wrote in her neat script. "Best tied before they unravel further." Craddock arrived the next morning, his sharp features softened by a rare smile, a bouquet of late asters in hand as thanks. "Miss Marple, you've done it again. Fletcher's in custody, evidence mounting. Toxicology matches, witnesses corroborate. What's amiss?" She accepted the flowers graciously, arranging them in a vase. "Nothing overt but subtleties. Recall Agnes's words. 'I didn't mean to kill, only to share.' Share what? Patterns, she said, but Eliza's savings were substantial. Perhaps more than envy at play. And her shop, thriving on Eliza's lace, yet ledgers showed skimming. Who benefited besides her? Craddock paced the drawing room, hands clasped behind. Her family? Widowed, no children, a nephew in London, but distant. "Distance is relative," Miss Marple mused. "I recall a case in my youth. A merchant's widow poisoned for inheritance, the culprit a distant relative with pressing debts. Check the nephew, Inspector, and revisit Tom. He seemed eager to point fingers, perhaps deflecting." Craddock nodded, intrigued. "Will do." "And the lace? Anything missed?" She spread her sketch anew. The final knots, faint but perhaps AIDED, aided? Eliza sensed complicity. Energized, Craddock departed, wiring London for details on Fletcher's nephew, one Victor Langford, a clerk with rumoured vices. Meanwhile, Miss Marple strolled the village, chatting idly at the post office. "Poor Agnes," she sighed to Mrs. Price, "alone in her schemes." Mrs. Price leaned in, voice low. "Not so alone. Her nephew visited last month. Flashy type, city clothes. Heard them arguing in the shop back room. Money matters." A thread pulled. Miss Marple probed further at the tea shop, where the baker recalled Victor's inquiries about Eliza. Asked after her health, casual-like, odd for a stranger. Patterns emerged. Victor, burdened by loans, pressuring Agnes for funds. Eliza's death freeing lace trade for profit. Craddock's telegram arrived swiftly. Victor's debts confirmed. Alibis shaky. Summoning him, it read. Victor Langford appeared at the station 2 days later. A slick young man in a pinstriped suit, pomaded hair gleaming. He lounged in the chair, cigarette dangling. "Aunt Agnes in trouble?" "Shocking. I barely know the old lace lady." Craddock's gaze hardened. "Yet you visited recently." "Argued with your aunt, if witnesses overheard, and inquiries about Eliza's health." Victor smirked. "Family chat." Aunt's business slumping suggested expansions. "Eliza, mentioned in passing, rival sort of." Lake entered with ledgers. "Your aunt skimmed Eliza's commissions. Deposits match your bank withdrawals. Coincidence?" Victor's composure cracked. "Loans, yes. Aunt helped. But poison, not my style." Miss Marple, consulted via phone, suggested, "Press on the basket." Who prepared it? Craddock did. The fatal dose, in the jam or tea. Your aunt said she ground herbs alone, but your fingerprints on her mortar? A bluff, but effective. Victor paled. "All right, I helped mix. Aunt said it was tonic. Didn't know it was lethal." Complicity revealed. Victor, greedy for quick cash, aided the dosing, pushing Agnes to accelerate when Eliza weakened slowly. But Miss Marple, informed, sensed more. "Tom Wilkins, his new boots, flush pockets, connect him." Craddock resummoned Tom, who arrived defiant. "Told all, saw Fletcher." "But you fetched for her," Craddock accused. "Harvested foxglove, delivered notes, paid handsomely." Tom broke. "She gave me shillings to watch the cottage, report on Eliza's habits, didn't know why." Trio exposed. Agnes mastermind, Victor instigator, Tom unwitting pawn. Gathering anew at the village hall, Craddock unveiled. Villagers gasped as connections wove. Envy sparked, greed fueled, youth exploited, Miss Marple explained gently. Eliza sensed the web, aided in her lace. Her message, a beacon. Arrests followed. Victor for conspiracy, Tom cautioned. St. Mary Mead exhaled, shadows lifting. Miss Marple knitted on, content. Threads bind us all, she thought. Cut one, others fray, but truth mends. Word count abbreviated for response. Expand to 3,000 plus in full. Wait, I need to write the full chapter with 2,500 to 3,500 words. The user query is creative writing, no tools needed. But the system prompt has tools. But for this, no. Proceed to write the chapter. Chapter 7. Lingering Shadows. The echoes of Agnes Fletcher's arrest reverberated through St. Mary Mead like the tolling of a distant bell. Sombre and insistent, refusing to fade into the crisp autumn air. The village, with its picturesque cottages and manicured gardens, had always prided itself on a certain insularity. A place where scandals were whispered over teacups, rather than shouted from rooftops. But murder, that most intimate of crimes, had pierced the veil, leaving behind a residue of doubt that clung to every conversation, every glance exchanged at the market or the church gate. "It's done now," old Mr. Bantry declared at the pub. raising his pint with forced joviality. "Fletcher's behind bars, and good riddance." Yet not all agreed. Some, like the vicar's wife, murmured of unfinished business, of spirits unrested. At Willowbrook Cottage, now empty and forlorn, the lace pillow sat untouched on the work table, bobbins frozen in mid-dance, as if Eliza Hawthorne's spirit lingered, waiting for the final knot to be tied. Inspector Derek Craddock, packing evidence boxes with Sergeant Lake, felt a similar unease. "Case closed," he said, sealing a folder. "Confession, motives, clues, all align." Lake nodded, but his eyes strayed to the attic beam, its hollow compartment a testament to Eliza's cunning. "Still, sir, that nephew of Fletcher's. Wired London. He's got priors for fraud. Coincidence?" Craddock paused, the word aided from Miss Marple's decoding echoing in his mind. Perhaps not. Dig deeper. Alibis, finances, and young Wilkins. His story shifted too easily. Word of lingering inquiries spread, fueling fresh speculation. By midday, the tea shop was abuzz. "Fletcher had help," Mrs. Price confided to a cluster of housewives, her voice low. "That city nephew, flashy car, shifty eyes, visited just before the end." Heads nodded. Memories surfaced of Victor Langford's brief appearances, his polished shoes muddied from village lanes, his conversations with Agnes behind closed doors. Miss Jane Marple, ever the quiet barometer of village sentiment, absorbed it all during her afternoon walk. Bundled in her tweed coat against the chill wind, she paused at the hedgerow where foxgloves still bloomed defiantly, purple bells swaying like silent accusations. "Nature persists," she murmured, plucking a leaf thoughtfully. Her mind sharp as the thorns beneath pieced fragments, Agnes's partial confession, "I didn't mean to kill," hinting at escalation beyond her control. Tom's flush pockets, unexplained by rabbit trapping, the lace's faint final knots, suggesting complicity. Returning to Danmead, she found Cherry setting out scones. "Gossip's rife, miss. They say Fletcher's nephew's involved. Debts up to his ears." Cherry's eyes sparkled with the thrill of it. "You think there's more?" Miss Marple buttered a scone delicately. "Always more, Cherry." Human greed is rarely solitary. It seeks allies, like vines entwining. Recall the Saint-Honoré affair, a poisoned chalice, the culprit a duo bound by blood and avarice. She telephoned Craddock that evening, her voice calm over the crackling line. "Inspector, the nephew, Victor Langford. Check his movements. He may have pushed Agnes further, and Tom Wilkins. His observations were too convenient, perhaps compensated." Craddock, at his desk amid stacks of telegrams, rubbed his chin. On it, "London reports Victor's in hock to bookies, thousands owed." Alibi for the fatal week? Business meetings, vague, summoning him tomorrow. Victor Langford arrived at the station under grey skies, his city swagger diminished by the rural setting. Tall and lean, with slicked-back hair and a tie too bright for sombre proceedings, he lit a cigarette with affected nonchalance. "This about Aunt Agnes. Tragic business. I was shocked, I tell you." Craddock, seated opposite, fixed him with a steady gaze. "Shocked enough to visit her frequently?" "Witnesses place you in St. Mary Mead multiple times, arguing, overheard mentioning money." Victor exhaled smoke, smirking. "Family matters. Aunt's shop struggling. I advised investments. My line, finance consulting." Lake slid bank statements across. "Your consulting involves heavy losses at the tracks. Deposits from Agnes coincide, skimmed from Eliza's sales." The smirk faltered. Coincidence? Aunt loaned freely, generous soul. "And Eliza?" Craddock pressed. You inquired after her health, casually but persistently. Victor stubbed his cigarette. Polite chat. Aunt mentioned her rival's frailty. Heart issues, wasn't it? A knock. Polk entered with a report. Fingerprints, sir. On Fletcher's mortar. Victor's. Victor's face strained. Visited her kitchen, helped with chores, ground spices, nothing more. Craddock leaned forward. Spices or foxglove? Your aunt confessed to dosing, but claimed accidental excess. You accelerated it, didn't you? Pressed for quicker results, with debts mounting. Victor stood, voice rising. Lies! I knew nothing of poison, but sweat beaded, the bluff called. Miss Marple, briefed later, suggested, probe the basket's contents. Jam or tea, Victor's hand in preparation. Re-interrogated, Victor cracked under pressure. All right, I mixed the last batch. Aunt dithered, said it was tonic to weaken Eliza, forced confessions of patterns. I added extra, thought it'd speed, things, didn't realize it'd kill. Complicity laid bare. Victor, desperate for inheritance via Agnes, instigated escalation, supplying stronger doses from city apothecaries. Yet Miss Marple, informed by Craddock's call, frowned. Not complete. Tom's role, his new wealth, question him anew, he may link the chain. Tom Wilkins was hauled in that afternoon, his lanky frame slumping in the chair, freckles stark against pallid skin. Again? Told you. Saw Fletcher. Nicked nothing big. Craddock's tone sharpened. But you did more? Fetched herbs for her? Watched the cottage, reported Eliza's routines, paid by whom? Tom's eyes darted. No, well, shillings from Mrs. Fletcher, to run errands, harmless. And Victor? Lake interjected. Seen talking to you at the pub, witnesses. Tom deflated. He gave me extra, to keep watch. Note when Eliza brewed tea alone. Said it was for surprising her with gifts. Didn't know it was poison. The web complete. Agnes the envious architect, Victor the greedy catalyst, Tom the opportunistic minion. Craddock assembled them at the village hall the next day. A larger gathering. Villagers packing benches, air thick with expectation. Thorpe attended, reformed and quiet. The vicar presided for decorum. Ladies and gentlemen, Craddock announced, the case deepens. Agnes Fletcher confessed, but shadows lingered, accomplices exposed. Miss Marple, invited to speak, rose gracefully. Eliza's lace whispered of aid, aided in its knots. Not solitary murder, but conspiracy. Mrs. Fletcher envied Eliza's craft, skimmed profits for years. But pressure came from Victor Langford, her nephew, drowning in debts. He urged stronger doses, prepared the fatal mix. Victor, cuffed beside Agnes, glared. Agnes wept. He pushed me, said we'd share the patterns, sell big in London. And Tom, Miss Marple continued, aided unwittingly, scouting, harvesting, lured by coins, blind to intent. Tom hung his head. Sorry, I needed money for Da's medicine. Villagers murmured, shocked yet riveted. Craddock detailed evidence, bank trails, fingerprints, confessions aligning. Eliza knew, Miss Marple concluded. Her message, a beacon through poison's fog. She pinned truth, trusting discernment. Arrests formalized. Victor for conspiracy to murder. Agnes reaffirmed. Tom for accessory. Lenient, youth considered. As the hall emptied, Thorpe approached Miss Marple. She saved me twice, forgave theft, cleared my name. Redemption possible, she replied softly. St. Mary Mead settled, shadows dissipating. Miss Marple gardened, pondering life's threads. One twist more, she thought, but peace reigned.